Hi, today is Friday, February 13th. Happy Valentine's Day for everyone celebrating. And for those not celebrating, have a great weekend. And for those celebrating Chinese New Year next year, Happy New Year if you celebrate. I'm Cindy Allen, CEO of TradeForce Multiplier, which is a global trade consultancy handling matters high-level strategy to more technical, hands-on work like classification and risk segmentation and review. Welcome to Simply Trade, Cindy's version, where I base an international trade update on a Taylor Swift song, thus the name, Cindy's version. This podcast is brought to you in association with the Global Training Center. Today's song is State of Grace. I'll get into the reasons in a moment, but first, what happened in trade this week? Trade was kind of a busy week this week. We did see that the U.S. reached a deal with Taiwan, which resulted in a tariff rate of 15% in total. So if MFN is over 15%, it limits it at 15%, or reciprocal in MFN reaches 15%. That's what's going to be paid. We also saw some details on the trade agreements that were reached with Guatemala, El Salvador, and Argentina. As well, we have seen an agreement, the details with the India trade agreement, where it did eliminate some of the reciprocal tariffs for the India-Russian oil issue that the U.S. had identified. So that's good news as well. If you need details on that, I suggest you look on the website for the U.S. trade representative. They have those deals in a little bit more detail. Also, the administration signaled that it intended to block the opening of the Gordie Howe Bridge, which is the bridge between Detroit, Michigan, and Ontario, Canada, over funding and ownership. This bridge has been in process for about 15 years and is just nearing completion and is planned to open in the next couple of weeks. So we'll continue to watch that. But Canada and Michigan, who have joint ownership of the bridge, have signaled that they intend to continue with the opening of the bridge. So that's good news. It does compete with a privately owned Ambassador Bridge that is currently in existence in Detroit and compete for billions of dollars in trade that move from Michigan to Ontario every day. The CBP has released the intent to actually require electronic bond filing, so surety bond filing, making that mandatory electronically. This is something that the many customs brokers and many importers and many surety companies actually already participate in electronic filing, but it does require all bonds to be transmitted electronically, something that I wholeheartedly support. CBP has also issued new Section 232 steel and aluminum tariff guidance. Again, in the ongoing saga of understanding exactly what CBP wants and the differing language between the actual executive order in the Federal Register and the direction that CBP has taken, they have softened their stance a little bit. So if you are subject to specifically the reciprocal tariffs on steel, aluminum, and copper, I would suggest you go out and look at that new guidance and make sure that you're following that. Also, some trade groups have received some writings from CBP specific to importers that do soften their stance on the calculation of labor and other overhead costs and how that is to be included or not included in the price of aluminum and steel. That softened approach said that that can be prorated based on the actual overhead for that article of steel. That's still being challenged in court, and the petitioner's stance is that none of the labor or overhead costs should be included in that. So we'll continue to watch that. You may want to continue to flag and keep track of your entries in that regard moving forward. Also today, on the Hill this week, the Senate Finance signaled that they actually want to extend the USMCA. And that's really good news. I think for traders, we need some stability. We need some constant trade agreements so that we can continue to plan, especially for something as important as the USMCA free trade agreement. We'll see if the administration is receptive to that or they continue to renegotiate USMCA. And we're hearing some possible rumors that the administration is more interested in pursuing a bilateral trade deal, one with Canada, one with Mexico. The fact that the Senate Finance actually signaled that they want to move forward with the USMCA for another year before renegotiating that in any way, shape, or form I think is some good news. Also, good news, the House voted to end IEEPA duties on Canada. This applies to the goods that are not subject to USMCA goods, which are not subject to IEEPA right now. So also another good step. This is not yet law. It has to go through the Senate, and the president does have veto authority on that. So we will continue to track that bill in the House and through the Senate and hopefully have some positive outcome, again, to make sure that we have some stability in trade. And some not so great news, a bill was introduced to eliminate first sale. These seem to be put forward by some of the same groups that oppose de minimis. There has been huge opposition to reducing duty in any way, shape, or form, and de minimis being eliminated was the first step. Now we're seeing additional programs being identified that eliminate duty in any way, shape, or form. And so the first sale has become a target. Many very large companies do participate in this program. It is a very heavily enforced program where the importers who participate do submit additional information to CBP, and CBP has additional visibility all the way back in the supply chain, which is something they've signaled is desirable for them, so that they can better risk manage the goods. So the fact that these importers give additional information on these goods and do take many more steps to ensure compliance, I think is not something that's been recognized. There are several trade associations who have begun weighing in on this, most indicating they're in favor of first sale and they want it to continue, something to watch as it goes through the House as well. In overseas news, the EU is moving their tariff deal through the lawmakers. They have put some additional limitations on the language that wasn't necessarily agreed to in the negotiations, and that's sunset deadlines and also some security triggers, as they call them, to ensure that the deals are not strayed from when they are implemented. In the industry news, Ford has announced a $900 million tariff bill expected because they were expected to receive automotive offsets that are listed in the 232, but these were disallowed by the administration for a period of several months, and that has resulted in $900 million plus in additional duty. So this has had an overall impact on the automotive industry. We have not seen the results from some of the other automotive industries that will be applying or have applied for these offsets. So we'll continue to watch that. But it will be interesting to see how Ford proceeds and if there is an available means to actually protest this decision or somehow challenge it in court, and if they feel that they want to go forward with that. Overall, global trade is up. We saw that. I attended the conference Manifest last week or earlier this week, and trade is up overall. We're seeing that on a global basis. However, trade to the U.S. is down. This has demonstrated that the rest of the world has decided that either the U.S. is too costly, it's too complicated, and they have proceeded to find other buyers for their goods. So this is also supported by a lot of trade agreements being signed globally without inclusion of the U.S. So we'll continue to see that until some of the trade programs do level out. So State of Grace. Why did I pick State of Grace? State of Grace is off of Taylor Swift's Red album. And I like this phrase, and I never saw you coming, and I'll never be the same. This is a state of grace. This is a worthwhile fight. And I think that's really applicable today because in the news, we're seeing that data, a lot of studies are being done, and a lot of information was put out there that they believe this to be true, but we're seeing study after study after study actually supporting the data that suggests consumers have paid $1,000 more in tariff costs. There is an expected $1,300 cost that every consumer will pay in the next year. We are only in year one of this administration, and we're seeing a huge impact to U.S. consumers, also to companies. Companies have not actually established more manufacturing in the U.S. We've seen our agricultural markets being limited in their ability to sell on export, which has had a negative impact on many farming communities. We're seeing a rise in bankruptcies of small farms across the U.S. that have not been able to find additional consumers for their goods, and they have not been able to rely on subsidies that the government has put out or buyouts that the administration has promised. So it is having an effect on rural America as well. And we know when a number of farms close, all of the supporting industries around that farm and in that community suffer as well. We're seeing many companies are being hit from many different angles. A recent study found that suppliers are passing on the costs of the tariff to the U.S. importers. On average, 90% of the cost of the tariffs are being passed to U.S. companies who are then raising prices to consumers. That has resulted in that $1,000 and expected $1,300 costs, but also it is raising costs for those manufacturers who are not direct importers, but are using inputs from companies who do import those goods. So we are seeing costs raise overall for manufacturing as well as for consumers. I think a positive sign in all of this is that we are seeing some companies begin to challenge the trade stance of the administration. We're seeing that both in the filings for the IEEPA tariffs challenge by the U.S. Supreme Court. We're seeing that by the 232 action that was filed in the U.S. Court of International Trade. We're seeing some companies being willing to stand up and identifying how the tariffs are actually impacting their bottom lines and impacting their consumers. Specifically Ford, I commend them for being public about the fact that it's a $900 million tariff impact to them. And that's on top of the other tariffs that they're paying as well. I am seeing Congress begin to question the approach and contemplate the fact that their role as Congress is to assess the tariffs. This isn't necessarily something that they should leave to the administration alone. The security tariffs for 232, some of the 301, and some of the expected 338 and 122 if IEEPA goes away. And the IEEPA tariffs are related to security and not necessarily should be used for a financial advantage or to advance the industries in the United States even. These are mostly security-related tariffs and to protect somewhat the U.S. industry. On the first sale, I'm also seeing some companies that are actually challenging the first sale bill, even though it was dropped very suddenly and very unexpectedly. With bipartisan support, we're seeing some companies already standing up saying that they benefit from this program, that it allows them to reduce costs overall, and that they do have very robust compliance programs to meet that. This is different than the de minimis, where we only saw very few select industries that were going to be heavily impacted actually stand up and say, this is not good, we shouldn't eliminate de minimis. But in this case, I'm seeing the beginnings of a coordinated pushback on that legislation. So it's given me hope that, we have maybe reached a state of grace and that this is a worthwhile fight being in international trade. That's it. Happy Chinese New Year. Happy Valentine's Day. We'll see you next week.